Okay, so returning to cognitive behavioral therapy. One of the kind of big components that the models will talk about, and if you read Ellis, you'll read his list, and if you read Freeman, you'll read his list, and if you read Beck, I think the Beck list is published in the sharp text that you guys are reading, but you'll read his list. But despite whose book you're reading about the cognitive or rational emotive behavioral therapy, most of them talk about these things that are called cognitive distortions, or maladaptive beliefs, or irrational beliefs, or what all those labels stand for is kind of stereotyped common ways of looking at the world that people with depression tend to have. Or now that CBT has been applied to other disorders, there might be a list of cognitive distortions which better fits prison inmates than people with depression. But there are these kind of common stereotypical ways that people have of viewing the world which get them into trouble, which lead them to be depressive, or lead them to be antisocial, or lead them to just not live as healthy a life as they can. So unhealthy thinking, maladaptive beliefs, cognitive distortions, call them what you want. An appreciation of kind of what they are, and being able to perk your ears up when you have a client in talking to you, so that you can be aware that, oh, maybe this client has a lot of cognitive distortion, and maybe a cognitive approach would be really helpful for them. So I'm just going to go over a few of them, and you can read the rest of them in your text. A classic that pretty much every model goes over gets called black and white, or some people call it all or nothing thinking. And what black and white thinking is, and just to preface, all of us do some of these things some of the time. Nobody escapes from cognitive distortions. It's when this kind of stereotypical way of thinking takes over people's life, interferes with their ability to, live a productive, need-fulfilling future and experience, then you say maybe some therapy on these would be helpful. So if you find yourself, as I'm going over these, everybody does, but it's just when people do it a lot and it becomes problematic, then you want to work with clients on it. Black and white thinking is this idea of seeing the world in terms of it is this or it is that, and not appreciating shades of gray in between. So an example of black and white thinking, and if you notice commonalities among these, they're not black and white separated apart from one another either. An example of black and white thinking that you can hear in the language that clients use is if clients come in and they fling around terms like never and always. It is very uncommon for people to never or always do many of the things which we are accused of. So if you have someone come in and they say, my husband never does this, my child always comes home and fights with her sister, my boss never gives anybody any compliments, those are signs of black and white thinking. Another black and white thinking example would be your kid comes home with a report card, and the report card looks something to the effect of A minus C, B, F, C, A minus, A, A. And the parent looks at it and says, my kid will never graduate from school, he fails everything he does. Well, of those grades, there was only one F. There was a bunch of A's and there was a couple other grades. But if you focus on just the F and see that as your child's whole academic status, that's black and white thinking. It's also focusing on the negative. But if you see this as he'll never do anything in life, he'll never pass school, that's a black and white thinking kind of error. So when you hear people who are, everything is either all this way or all that way, it's common if you're working with clients with borderline personality. They talk about therapists and people in their life being either on a pedestal or being way down in the wastebasket. So seeing people as all good or all bad. People will start in a new relationship. Oh, my new boyfriend or girlfriend is everything I've ever wanted, and they're only lovely and beautiful and kind and sweet and loving. And then suddenly they stand you up for a date, or they're half an hour late, and you go, he or she is the biggest rotten, dirty, awful, stinking person on the whole planet Earth. Well, last week they were the most warm, loving creature that, God has ever created. How can they have turned from an angel into a devil in 1 week? Well, he was 30 minutes late, or called me and said that his mother said he had to clean the house. Oh, the nerve. Well, that's black and white thinking. Most of us are complex. If you view the world too much this way, it's likely that you're not as happy as you could be. Focusing on the negative is when there's a bunch of things like the report card that I just talked about, and the parent will just focus on that F and completely forget that there was a bunch of A's, B, and a C. But people who go through life kind of always seeing the gloomy and the dark, and ignore or seem very impervious to recognizing the fact that many things are very good. So they may focus on the negative in their children, they may focus on the negative in their coworkers, they may focus on the negative in their partner, they often focus on the negative in their self, and it kind of blinds them to what's good. Personalization is when people take things personally, which aren't necessarily directed at them. So if you walk by a group of people who you know, and they're all kind of huddled together, and let's say you were just walking down the hall, and there's a group of people you know, and they're all talking quietly among themselves, and you're sure, automatically, that they're talking about you and they're saying something nasty. Now, they were just standing there talking, there's no necessary reason to think that they were saying anything about you, yet you worry that they were. That's personalization. Catastrophizing is when you take a small something that goes wrong, and you're positive that the end of the world is forthcoming as a result. So in the example that I used earlier over here on the board, where I talked about if I were to walk into work and my boss woman were to say, Heather, I need to talk with you before you go home today, if I were to catastrophize that, the first thing I think is, geez, I wonder what she's talking about. I bet I've done something wrong. Oh no, she'll probably fire me if I've done something wrong. If she fires me, I don't know her will write me a good letter of recommendation. I'll never get another job in my life. If I'm unemployed, maybe my husband will hate me because I can't contribute financially. I'll be out on the street. I'll lose custody of our child. Oh, my life is over. Because my boss said she needed to talk to me? That's catastrophizing. Anyhow, these are just a couple examples of cognitive distortions. Read through the other ones in the text and then kind of listen for when your clients engage in thinking like this. Listen for when you yourself, or when your boyfriend or girlfriend or friends or family do this. A lot of us do at least some of this some of the time, and it often gets us in trouble. One of the things you focus on in CBT is listening for clients doing this and then helping them to break that habit. Okay, let's talk about the B. This is cognitive behavioral therapy. Where does the B fall? B stands for behavior, and there are a variety of different ways that B behavior is part of CBT. Part of it is, particularly if you're working with people who are seriously depressed, be behave, not like be good, like a parent would say to a kid, but do something. People with serious depression have a hard time doing much. They feel low energy, low motivation, nothing is inspiring, interesting, or fun, and yet the more we withdraw from life, the harder it is to get ourselves back on the path to well-being and happiness, because we're depriving ourselves of any opportunity to sort of engage in life and start feeling better. So CBT may think of itself as sort of the B part, the behavior part, as putting the proverbial cart in front of the horse, but rather than waiting for the client to feel motivated to do something, the CBT therapist says, do something. Even if you don't feel like it, start doing something. And oftentimes if you're working with clients, you want to start small. So tomorrow, I'd like you to set your alarm for 10 in the morning, get up and take a shower, wash your hair. Then if you don't want to do anything else, go back to bed. Do that 3 times this week and come talk with me about it at our next session. If the client's able to do that, now I'd like you to get up, take a shower, put on clean clothes. Go outside, get the newspaper, bring it in, and then if you want to crawl back in bed, that's fine. It's just slowly starting people to get back into the world. And I've worked with people who are depressed who literally lie in a hospital room and do not leave their room all day long. So depression can really result in almost doing absolutely nothing. So have people start doing something. Another big component of CBT is what gets called the mini experiment. A mini experiment is having people test out behaviorally to see whether their belief, their cognition, their perception of reality is indeed true. So let's say that you have a client who is painfully shy and has this belief that if I initiate a conversation, I can't make friends, I can't meet new people, I just can't do it, I can't talk to others. So, well, is there evidence to support? Evidence is another big component of CBT. So a piece of homework is often having people gather evidence to support their beliefs, and that's where mini experiments often play in. So if you say, well, is there any evidence to support the fact that you can't talk to new people? Well, I don't. Well, what do you think would happen if you did? I can't imagine. Well, why don't we set up a little experiment where you tried it? So you could cook up with a client, and if you set up a mini experiment, you want to try to set it up so that people don't humiliate themselves and make fools of themselves, feel like they're being kicked or slapped in the face. But let's say that you're living here in Walla Walla, and when I lived in Walla Walla, I used to like to shop at Safeway because the clerks at Safeway were very friendly. So let's say that Safeway has friendly clerks. You work with a client, you role play how to start a conversation as you're checking out with your groceries at Safeway. And the client comes in and says something like, hi, what kind of cloudy day we're having today, isn't it? And then they see what the clerk says. Well, if the clerk doesn't drop down dead and run screaming from the store, maybe the clerk will say, yeah, it is. And then the client can think, oh my gosh, what do I say now? But maybe they could perpetuate the conversation. A mini experiment is just a small test of a person's belief. If you have a kid come home who has terrible relations with a sibling or with a parent, and the kid says, oh, I can never be nice to my mom, I can never be nice to my sister, she'd just pick on me, or something like that. Have them test it out, have them try it, see how it works. Those are mini experiments. Now, if it's true, the person comes in, they said hi to the clerk at Safeway, and the clerk absolutely, dropped down and they called the ambulance. That's validated that I can't talk to people, or the client dropped down and they had to call the ambulance from a panic attack. But if it went okay, you have evidence. Now, it may be that the clerk sneered and didn't say anything. Then you analyze the situation. You say, okay, we've got some data here. You tried talking with someone new, and it didn't work. Let's take a look at this. Maybe the person went in and they hadn't bathed in a week. They hadn't brushed their teeth in a week. They hadn't brushed their hair. Their clothes were dirty and rumpled. They just kind of looked and smelled not very appealing. It's hard to talk with someone, and many people in our culture don't like talking with people who look and smell kind of unappealing. Well, then the mini experiment may give you, and hopefully you as a therapist would recognize that beforehand, but if you hadn't, mini experiments may give you insight into skills deficits. Skills deficits are where people simply have not learned how to behave in ways that are going to be need fulfilling. So another big piece of the B is helping people to develop skills. And this is a big component of the cognitive behavioral movement, as well as the behavioral movement, is giving people tools, giving people training, teaching people how to behave in ways so they can interface the world successfully. So whether it's job application skills, whether it's communication skills with partners, with friends, whether it's just saying no to sex, drugs, rock and roll, whether it's skills with people with schizophrenia on, let's say, basic hygiene, how to get up in the morning and take a shower at least twice a week and brush your teeth and run a comb through your hair. Whatever skills may be lacking, skill training is a big piece of the behavioral component of cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay, the last thing which I want to go over, and I find this to be really very helpful, if you have clients come in and they're just not sure, you want to talk with them about the fact that you're a cognitive behavioral therapist and is this a model which seems like it'll work to them, and they're like, well, what is CBT? And you say, well, it's looking at how you perceive situations instead of what the situation is. Well, sometimes some people will take offense. They'll say, what? You're saying my life isn't terrible? My life is terrible. And they'll feel very much like they're not being heard and not being understood. So I find a very nice tangible way of demonstrating this is through what gets called the A, B, C, D, E chart. And actually there's now like an F, and I think there may even be a G, but A, B, C, D, E works fine, and we don't need to take up the whole board from here to milk free water. So what you do with this chart, the first three we kind of went over on the first take for CBT, is you write down activating events, beliefs, and consequences. And then through therapy, you teach people to do the D and E section. By the way, Al Ellis gives credit for the acronym A, B, C, D, E, coming up with the terms activating event, belief, consequences, dispute, and effect. So let's start off with a somewhat ambiguous situation. It's your birthday, and you wake up morning of your birthday, and your family gives you no acknowledgement. So if you're, a teenager or young adult living at home, no mom, dad don't say anything, brothers and sisters don't say anything. If you're married, your spouse, your kids don't say anything. Nobody acknowledges in your family that it's your birthday. How might you feel if you wake up, it's your birthday, and nothing happens? There's a variety of ways that people would feel. Let's say that you wake up on your birthday. Birthday's a big thing to you. Nobody says happy birthday. Nobody comes in and surprises you. Nobody does anything. You feel sad. You feel hurt. You may feel a little bit angry. These may be emotions that you're experiencing. It's my birthday and nobody cares. So you feel better. That's your emotional reaction. What's your behavioral reaction? Well, if you're feeling sad, hurt, and angry, you may go into, a nice clinical term is a snit. Let us say that you withdraw from your family. You avoid talking to people, you avoid eye contact with people, and you act kind of grouchy. Now, if no one acknowledges your birthday and you feel sad, hurt, and angry, go into a snit, withdraw, avoid people, and feel grouchy, are you doing that because it's your birthday and you're not getting acknowledged? Or are you doing that because of what you're telling yourself about the fact that no one is acknowledging you? It's likely to me that what's happening is these are not reactions to the situation so much as they are to what you're telling yourself about the situation. And that might be something like, no one cares about me. You could go on with, they didn't even remember. And this could go into, I'm invisible, or I don't matter to them. Or whatever thoughts you, nobody loves me, no one cares, I feel terrible. And if you're having these thoughts, these responses are completely natural. Well, let's say another person in a parallel universe wakes up on his or her birthday. Their family doesn't acknowledge them. They say, ha, cool. Now, how do they feel? They feel happy and excited. And what do? They act real nonchalant. Now, if in fact someone else in a parallel universe had this response, I would argue that they're probably having a different belief. What belief might lead you for it to be your birthday, no one acknowledges you, and you feel like, wow, this is cool, and you just like act real nonchalant. Well, maybe this person believes, aha, there will be a great surprise party tonight. If you're thinking, aha, The reason that nobody is saying anything is I bet they're all being really quiet and secretive because there's going to be a really cool party for me tonight. This is awesome. Now, that's as much a possible reality of this situation as this is. As you wake up on your birthday and nobody's acknowledging it, you're not sure which belief is more true. But which belief you have leads to a hugely different reaction. And helping clients to see this. So when clients first come in, this is reality. This is what they're doing. As I talk about the daily thought record, this is something clients already have in their repertoire. They have an activating event, they have a reaction, and if you help them to get in touch with it, they'll realize that they're probably having an interpretation and perception of thought. Clients many times are not aware of this. Clients come in and they talk actions, consequences, action, situation, thoughts, and feelings, or situation, feelings, and behavior, situation, feeling. And you need ways to break in with phrases like, and what were you telling yourself when that was happening? Or what thoughts were going through your head? Ways to like bait the hook and go in and look for their thoughts. And ways to train clients to become aware that the reason I reacted this way was this is what I was telling myself. So if clients come in and they're doing this, what you can then do with them is you can say, imagine this person in a parallel universe who wakes up and they say, ha, this is very cool. I know they're planning a surprise party for me. How would you feel if that's what you thought? Oh, well, if that's what I thought, I would think it was great. I think, wow, everybody loves me. This is so cool. They're planning a big surprise party. Well, so how would you feel? Well, I feel happy and excited. How would you feel? I feel cool, like nothing was going on. Well, is there anything that says this is necessarily more real than this? I guess not. Could you think this? Well, I don't know, not necessarily in my family, but could you think it? I guess I could. If you thought it, how would you feel? Well, this is how I react. Just sort of helping clients to recognize that there are other ways they could think about situations. That thoughts are not God-given truths that, come down from on high into the brain. Thoughts are things that we generate, we create on our own, and we have some conscious control over. So helping clients work through this disputing and affect columns can be really very beneficial. Now, at first, clients will be like, this is my family. They don't love me. They don't care. Birthdays are not a big deal. I know that I'm right. Well, you can't argue their rightness and wrongness, but what you can do is you can say, well, let's just brainstorm. If it was somebody else who woke up in this situation. And sometimes you have to kind of nudge clients along. You need to remind them that brainstorming is any possible idea. It's not necessarily has to be based in truth. It's just let's toss around a bunch of ideas. And so come up with a variety of different things you could think. Perhaps you could think, I wish they'd remember my birthday, but this is my family. Birthdays have never been a big deal to them. Such is life. I will get over it. They have other good qualities. If you thought that, how would you feel? I'd be a little disappointed, but it wouldn't be brokenhearted the way I am here. Okay, so one thing is you could think they were having a surprise party, and sooner or later truth will tell if that's true. Another thing is you could think, oh well, they have other strengths, and acknowledging people on their birthday, remembering such things, isn't one of their strengths, such as life. But just have people recognize this has an effect on these. And they have choices. They can dispute their thoughts, and that will have a different effect on their perception of reality. And sometimes it's more accurate and sometimes it's less accurate, but if they recognize the way they perceive things really does make a difference, it gives them more choice and more control in their life and often can break people out of